our sole purpose is to provide people information about nuclear energy. And, you can see that whether it's through the content we provide through social media, whether it's through the excellent work that our group of experts do in the media, on social media or other places, whether it's the now 5 information evenings we've held in regional communities where we've let community members ask our experts questions about nuclear energy and have them answered.
Which regional, where'd you go?
So we decided to focus on the sites the coalition had identified for nuclear plants. The reason for that is because that obviously these communities are getting tons of people showing up at their door asking them what they think about nuclear energy. So we thought that it's best that we provide them information about nuclear energy so they can have an informed position. So we've been to, first one we did was in Lithgow in New South Wales. Then we went to Collie in Western Australia. We've done Kingaroy recently, which is near the Toorong power plant.
Yeah, I've got a friend whose family's from there, and he's been talking about, it's really stirred up in a debate.
Oh, it has. And recently what we did is we did like back-to-back ones in Gladstone, which hasn't been identified as a site, but I'd preface, this isn't a Nuclear for Australia position, but there's a lot of interest in Gladstone for nuclear energy, and I think it could potentially be a good solution for, a really industrial community like Gladstone. But we also then did one in Biloela, which is, short drive from the Callow power station. But I think, having been to, I didn't go on all of these because I was in grade 12, so I didn't go to Lithgow or Collie. But it's fascinating how the debate is playing out, and there's a lot of strong feelings on both sides. But I think the general sentiment that I get is that these communities, and I think probably Australia more broadly, would like to consider nuclear energy. Sorry.
That's all good.
And you can see that as well through the polls and stuff, that there is a majority support for nuclear energy. And when you look at it at that community level, a lot of it, draws back to the fact that there's a lot of issues currently with the renewables rollout. I support renewables, but when you look at currently at some of the issues in these communities where there isn't proper consultation, and they've got all of these kind of issues, it's causing a lot of issues for them. And I think a lot of them therefore see nuclear power as a potential solution, especially when you consider the relative land use of a nuclear power plant as compared to, solar farms, wind farms, those kind of things.
And I guess you'd probably, in those communities, those industrial communities and regional ones, I guess there'd be concerns over job losses due to the transition from fossil fuels to renewables. Have you found that's been a source of concern for people?
Oh, 100%. And you can only, like if you go to a solar farm or wind farm, there's barely anyone working there. And you compare that to a nuclear power plant, like I said earlier with Hinkley C, you've got 13,000 people constructing that. When it's operating, I probably can't give you an exact number, but you'll probably have around 1,000 people working there with, good union, full-time, good union, well-paid jobs there. And I think therefore a solution like nuclear energy makes a lot of sense for people. It also makes sense because all of these locations which have been identified by the coalition have coal plants in them, or sites where coal plants have been. And for these community members, a lot of whom have worked in these coal plants, it's fascinating because around 76% of the jobs in coal plants, this is according to a think tank in the US, could be directly transferable to a nuclear plant.
Oh, really? Okay.
And the reason for that is because coal plants are thermal power plants, much like a nuclear power plant is, where you obviously burn the coal, that creates the heat, that then turns the turbine to create electricity or whatever. And the fascinating thing is a lot of the processes, a lot of how a coal plant works, very similar to a nuclear plant. So a lot of the time, both coal plant and nuclear plants will both have cooling towers. which is used to be able to, cool down the turbines, which are used in both. In addition to that, you've got all of these different other similarities between coal plants and nuclear plant jobs, which make it a really good transition for communities. But that's not to say that there's obviously also a role for renewables. I think it all just comes back to having a balanced energy mix. But there does have to be considerations about what these communities will do, because there could be huge issues once a lot of these coal plants shut down. And if those renewable jobs aren't there, then what are they going to do?
And in terms of the difference in, I guess, quantity of jobs associated with coal plants compared to the quantity of jobs available to provide an equivalent amount of energy, is it less with nuclear?
It's more, actually.
Really?
I can't give you a specific number, but there are specific numbers available. There's a good comparison in the US Department of Energy Advanced Nuclear Liftoff report. The difference in terms of jobs is, I think people assume that if you're working in a nuclear power plant, you have to be Einstein. And yes, there are those kind of people who have to be there, in the control room, in the reactor, making sure it all runs smoothly. But the reactor is only a small part of the broader nuclear power plant. So you've got this issue where, Australia will have to skill up people to work in the nuclear plants with nuclear specific knowledge, whether it's, reactor operators, whether it's, nuclear engineers, all those kind of people. And we do actually, at our universities and stuff, have some nuclear pathways. So for instance, UNSW comes to mind. They've got a nuclear innovation centre and stuff. But there's a lot more happening in AUKUS in terms of nuclear skilling and stuff. But you've got all those jobs, and that's obviously pretty unique to a nuclear power plant. You don't have, nuclear engineers at a coal plant. There's also then, this depends based on whatever, the particular country does in terms of security and nuclear security, which is basically, the purpose of that is making sure that the nuclear fuel is, not tampered with or anything, or, terrorists, say if a terrorist tried to target a nuclear plant, how would that be secured? But then obviously there's that workforce, which is a pretty large workforce, which is required to ensure the security at those facilities. So those are, there'd be more unique job factors at nuclear plants, but those are two that probably come to mind. But there are more jobs in nuclear, and the important thing is that they're the highest paying jobs of any energy industry. And I think also in the US, they're the most likely to be unionised workforces. And the funny thing as well, this is, in a US context, it's safer to work at a nuclear plant than it is, say, at a McDonald's or supermarket.
Really?
Yeah, and the radiation you'd be exposed to, say, from working in a nuclear plant, or certainly like living within the range of a nuclear plant. Now this is going to sound crazy, but it's literally less than eating a banana. And the reason
Really? There's radiation in a banana?
Yeah, because of the potassium. So it sort of just goes to show that, these amounts in terms of radiation and stuff we're talking about are just so negligible. I would have got so much more radiation on my flights to visit these nuclear power plants than I would have standing next to them.
Just because you're further up in the air?
Yeah, the cosmic, all of that from the plane flights. And certainly like flight attendants, they have to have their radiation monitored.
Really?
Because,
Wow, okay.
they receive more radiation than nuclear workers, is my understanding. So there's all of these kind of things, and people often forget, even if you have an X-ray or CT scan, certainly if you're having a CT scan, that's a lot more radiation. But also just us sitting in this room, sort of in the middle of the city, we're being exposed to radiation right now because everyone is exposed to a certain level of background radiation. You get more if you're, in a city or something like that, or even if you're standing next to Parliament House, because of the amount of granite at Parliament House.
Does granite give off radiation?
Yeah, so Parliament House, my understanding is that you're exposed to more radiation at Parliament House than you are at a nuclear plant. And people have used proper dosimeters to measure that. So it's, and there's no way for someone not to be exposed to, well, there probably is, but it's probably not very...
You trap them inside
Yeah.
one of those reinforced boxes you were talking about before.
Yeah, but, you know, when people say, oh, you know, we need to be radiation free and whatever, or like nuclear free country, all those kind of things, it's like, well, you can never avoid it. And anyway, there's this whole kind of thing, but you probably heard me say too many times, it's important to put it into perspective. And certainly, I think probably that banana analogy put it into perspective pretty well. Even simply like, you know, sleeping next to a partner in their bed, because humans emit a certain amount of radiation, is my understanding, you know, will expose you to radiation, you know, excess radiation. Same as eating avocado toast or eating Brazil nuts, all these kind of everyday activities. And so if you're worried about radiation, if that was the reason, you know, the nuclear power ban was introduced, why aren't we banning people from eating bananas? And that might sound banal.